this morning's online Bible study. Whether you're tuning in at Twitter or Periscope at Bible Study Cam, whether you're on Facebook.com/reflective Bible study, whether you're on YouTube at The Online Preacher, or even at the onlinepreacher.com/live, wherever you happen to be tuning in, whether it's one of those places or somewhere else, whether this is on live or on replay, I want to welcome you to this morning's online Bible study. And this morning, we're going to be in a part one of a two-part series, you could say, focusing in on a very unique miracle. And one of the ways that this miracle is unique is that, if I understand correctly, if I did my research correctly, this miracle is only found in the Gospel of Mark. Which is fascinating for those who are familiar with the Gospels, because Mark's Gospel has very little about it that is unique to Mark. More of Mark is found in either Matthew or Luke, and there's only a handful of places in Mark that you could consider unique to that Gospel and none other. And so with that said, there's two big ideas that I want to share, but instead of sharing them both today and making this a little bit longer of a Bible study, I'm going to split it into two. And so this morning and tomorrow morning, we're going to be focusing in on this miracle and what we can discover from it. So this morning, we're going to be looking at part one. We're looking at Mark chapter 8, starting in verse 22, and I'm going to read from the Good News Translation. They came to Bethsaida, and this is referring to Jesus and his disciples, where some people brought a blind man to Jesus and begged him to touch him. Jesus took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. After spitting on the man's eyes, Jesus placed his hands on him and asked him, "Can you see anything?" The man looked up and said, "Yes, I can see people, but they look like trees walking around." Jesus again placed his hands on the man's eyes. This time, the man looked intently. His eyesight returned, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus then sent him home with the order, "Don't go back into the village." Now, this is a fascinating parable, or fascinating miracle in Jesus' ministry. This is the miracle, you could say, that Jesus didn't get right the first time. But there's a lot more going on in this event than what we might consider with just a casual reading. And while I'm going to focus in on this miracle itself tomorrow, this morning I want to draw our attention onto an idea or a statement that's made early on and contrast it with how this passage ends. At the beginning of verse 23, Mark tells us that Jesus took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And this passage ends in verse 26 when Jesus then sent him home with the order, "Don't go back into the village." Now it's interesting because to set the stage for this miracle, Jesus takes this guy and he leads him away from the crowd that brought him to Jesus and the crowd that begged Jesus to touch him. This crowd wanted to see a miracle. I suspect that this crowd wanted to see a miracle more than they cared about this blind man being healed. But that then brings a dilemma into Jesus' ministry, because if someone who is hurting is brought to him, Jesus' default response, you could say, is that Jesus wants to help and heal that individual. But in this case, by helping and healing this individual, Jesus would also be giving into the demands of a very self-centered, selfish crowd that is only interested in seeing a miracle. And so Jesus does the best of both worlds scenario, you could say, is that Jesus takes the man and he takes him out of the village. In my own mind, he's taking him away from that crowd, tells the crowd to wait here, stay here, any one of those things, and he leaves the village. And so that he is then alone with this man. It's possible that a handful of disciples are there, but nothing in this event would would lead me to believe that that's the case. And when Jesus is outside of this village, this town, with this man, then he is able to heal him. But it's interesting because Jesus takes the man out of the village, and then Jesus tells the man, don't go back into the village, which suggests in my mind that Jesus understood, or at least knew, or perhaps perceived, maybe God gave him this realization that this man was not a villager in this village. This man did not live in this town. Which is fascinating to think about, because that would mean that the townspeople, or a group of people from Bethsaida, because this is the town that we're talking about, they left, they went somewhere else, and they found someone who was blind and mute and all of these things. Okay, this guy was blind. There's a handful of miracles that are similar, because there's more than one blind person that Jesus healed. This guy was blind. And so these villagers, they went out, they found somebody who was blind, and then they brought him to this village, because I believe they may have known that Jesus was coming their way. And they wanted to see a miracle. It's interesting that Jesus doesn't avoid this village because of the selfish nature of those in the village. But Jesus also doesn't succumb to their selfish wishes. Jesus isn't interested in satisfying selfish desires among those who were around him. But Jesus was passionate about helping those who were hurting. And in this miracle event, we can see Jesus pushing the selfish crowd away and healing the man who was hurting, the man who potentially had even lost his faith. But I'm jumping ahead. That's actually a teaser, you could say, maybe for tomorrow morning, when we look a little bit closer at this man and the details of the miracle, and perhaps one reason why this miracle didn't go as planned at first. So if you're curious about that, tune in tomorrow morning at this time, and which is 6:45 Mountain Time, which would be 8:45 Eastern Time, and translate that into whatever time zone you're in. And let's dive in tomorrow morning to discover what's significant and unique about this miracle. But for our time this morning, I want to leave us with this truth, this idea that Jesus isn't interested in satisfying selfish desires, but Jesus is interested in helping others. And so in our own lives, are we doing nice things, good things, being helpful to one another because we are interested in being rewarded? Are we interested in the praise and the thanks and the gratitude that would come our way for helping others? Are we interested in the follows or the likes or the popularity that might come as somebody who is publicly helping others? Or are we more interested in simply helping, and helping in ways that might not be visible to those who would be looking for people who are helping? Helping under the radar, under the spotlight, and helping in ways that don't attract attention to ourselves. Because that's what Jesus modeled for us in this event. And he tells this man, don't go back into the village, because I suspect that Jesus didn't want to give that selfish crowd the satisfaction that even if they weren't present for the healing, that they were responsible for it. Jesus wants to help us, but he also doesn't want to help us in a way that would take our focus off of God. And so with that said, thank you for tuning in this morning, whether you're tuning in at Twitter or Periscope, at Facebook, at YouTube, at one of those places or somewhere else, whether you're watching this live or watching this on replay. And if I shared something that was encouraging or challenging, and you want to let me know about it, jump into any one of the comment boxes. I know that Periscope's comment box will end as soon as this live stream ends, but any one of the other places, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or wherever you happen to be watching this, jump into the comment box and let me know what you think. And if this video, if this message has resonated with you and you know of somebody who would benefit from it, then I would encourage you to share this video with them. Because while we're separated physically and by distance and by social distancing and all of the craziness happening in the world today, let's stay connected digitally, but most importantly, keep our hearts and our minds and our eyes and our perspectives focused on Jesus. So with that said, thank you for tuning in this morning, and be back tomorrow morning when we uncover some amazing things from the miracle itself, and perhaps one reason why this miracle didn't go the way we might have expected the first time around. So thank you for tuning in this morning, and be back tomorrow morning.